Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. I'm really excited about today because I've got a guest that, well, I guess the best way to start this is by saying that between the two of us, we've been walking this earth for 135 years. And if you go back, that means that if one of us would have been born then, we would have been born in 1889. And for those of you who are wondering, well, who was president of the United States in 1889? The answer is Benjamin Harrison, our 20th president. And but neither one of us were alive in 1889, although one of us looks like he could have been, and I won't say which one that is. But hey, I'm excited to have a longtime friend, a mentor, brilliant mind, a business leader, and a tremendous leader, my friend Paul Kaliades. Paul, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Bill, thank you, my dear friend, and it's truly my pleasure.
So I'm going to call you coach for this segment today because that's what we're going to talk about. So a little bit of background for our viewers and our listeners who may not know who Paul is. So Paul actually went to Columbia University, happened to also be the place where Lou Gehrig went to school. Did you and Lou Gehrig go to college together? Were you guys classmates by any chance, Paul?
Yes, he was a senior when I was a freshman.
Yeah. I suspect that was a little before your time, actually. But Columbia University in New York City, and so Paul was a very accomplished collegiate football player, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you actually had someone vote for you for the Heisman Trophy. Is that correct, or you had a few votes?
Actually, two votes. Actually,
two votes. Yeah, two votes for the Heisman Trophy at Columbia. And in the year 2000, they celebrated their greatest players from 1900 to 2000. They named their all-century team for that period of time. And our guest today, Paul Kaliades, actually was on that list. And so you're actually very revered and well known at Columbia University. Kind of a quick side story: Paul's son Charles was a high school quarterback and a very good athlete in his own right, and was considering going to Columbia to play football. And during his visit, when he saw what a big deal his old man was, he said, I don't want to be in my dad's shadows. I want to go somewhere where I can build my own legacy." And so he passed on Columbia, and chose Princeton. No, he didn't choose Princeton. That would have been just a real thorn in your side, right?
Yes.
But he chose another school because he didn't want to be in his dad's shadow. So, Paul, the reason I wanted to have you on as my guest is um, after graduating from college, at some point in your life, then you became a public school teacher, correct?
Correct.
And by the way, what did you teach? What was your subject?
U.S. history.
So, okay. I should have known that because I too taught U.S. history in high school. And so at some point, then you joined the coaching staff for the football team. And was that your first year as a teacher, or a couple years later?
Well, Bill, ostensibly I got into teaching, and this is almost a sort of backwards approach to coach. And
Okay.
I had an opportunity to be a grad assistant at Columbia. I was going to go to the Teachers College, and then that didn't work out, and I started teaching and coaching, and ultimately in 1979 became the head coach at Cresskill High School in Bergen County in Cresskill, New Jersey.
And so that's where I wanted this conversation to go. So here you are, 1979, and so at this point you're a 28-year-old young man, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, see how I did that math real quick in my head. Pretty good for a history teacher.
Very good. I'm impressed.
And so at 28 years old, you're now tasked. Were you the head coach? Was that your
Yes.
at that point? Okay. So here you are, you're 28 years old, you're the head coach of a bunch of 16, 15, 16, 17, and 18-year-old high school boys. What was that like?
Well, interesting does no justice. But seriously, Bill, the time at Cresskill High School, becoming the head coach in '79, really turned out to be some of the most rewarding and influential experiences for my entire life, both on a personal and on a professional level. The '79 team was coming off a 1-8 season the year before.
I was going to ask, how good were they? What did you inherit? Sounded like you inherited a mess.
I inherited a mess. I was actually the defensive coordinator on that team. I first went to Cresskill as an assistant coach and teacher, and it was a pretty bad season. And then I was fortunate enough to be, selected as the head coach. So I had my work cut out for me, but I was really fortunate and in many ways blessed to have two guys that worked for me for the entire 8 years that I was the head coach. Offensive coordinator Joe Pompeo, and then the defensive coordinator Bob Valley. And we were all about the same age, and we had similar philosophies about the game. We were all in the same stage of life. We were all recently married. We were just starting to have children. So, and I'm still very close with both of those guys. But this will fit very nicely into your culture approach here, because we immediately had to change the culture.
Yeah, sure. They're
And
1-8.
yeah, well, but and that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that it needed to be broken down and rebuilt, literally from the ground up. And one of the things that I did was I met with the rising seniors. I got the job in the spring of '79, and really wanted to get them to buy into what we were doing. And it was very enlightening. And to a man, everyone, look, we want to be treated like men. We want to play. We want to win. So I said, well, I'm going to go back to my beloved high school coach, Roy Corso, who is now 83 years old. Jude and I just had dinner with Roy and his wife, Maria, a few weeks ago. And his mantra was there was no substitute for hard work. And that, Bill, has carried me through every step of my life from, Snyder High School football. So we got the buy-in from these seniors, and like anything else, when you're trying to change culture, it's tantamount to pushing that stone up the hill. But one episode that really struck out, because these young men had never worked this hard in their lives, and I said, look, we're going to be in better shape than everyone that we play. And early on, we were running sprints, and we had some really tough kids. And one of the toughest was named John Butino, who was a lineman who you didn't want to mess around with. And they were belly aching about the sprints. And Butino just stood up right before I blew the whistle for the linemen to start running their sprints. And he turned around and addressed the team. I'll keep the 4-letter words out of this, but essentially it was shut the hell up and just do it. And Bill, that was a turning point for us, because not only was he a leader, he was revered and feared. So that really started to change our culture. And that first year we had a winning season. You could just sense that the momentum had changed to the better, and we started to really build on this monumental change for a winning season. They hadn't had a winning season in like forever. And then the next year in 1980, we wound up.
I'm gonna interrupt you for a moment, because that's a great point. I want to touch on that. I don't want to lose that moment. So you talk about this Pitino kid. I'm assuming no relation to legendary basketball coach Rick Pitino.
No, Pitino with a B, B-U-T-T.
Pitino. Okay. So you got this Pitino kid who is clearly physically, in a position to where he could lead, because people were afraid of him. He was a tough kid, probably a big kid, being an offensive lineman, but he had the right mindset. He had the right attitude. And, one of the things I talk about often with culture is, a lot of people say you build a culture, and I say you don't build a culture, you grow a culture. Because if you build something, when you get it to completion, there's nothing more to be done, right? But when you're trying to grow something, you always have to tend to it. You always have to pull the weeds, because weeds are always going to try and rear their ugly head. And, in your world, the coaching this high school football team, the weeds were the kids who didn't want to work as hard, or had a bad attitude, or whatever the case might be. And if you're the only one out there working the field, you'll get it done, but it takes forever. But when somebody jumps in and grabs a tool or jumps on a tractor and starts working the field with you, now you've just multiplied, you've doubled the amount of work you can get done. And so every culture needs a Batino, right? Every leader needs to have that core group of people around you who say, hey, coach, I see what you're trying to do, and I buy in, and I'm there with you. You can count on me. Give me something to do. Give me some work. Show me the weeds that need to be pulled, and I'll get it done. So,
Exactly.
that's a great story.
Exactly. We also just didn't change the culture on the field. We started to do things with the team. Joe Pompeo thought about the idea of having ZD night. So one Friday night, we asked all the parents, to
Ziti, the food, the
eat.
Italian
Right.
food.
So we had a dinner with the team. We invited the
Did you
cheerleader.
have to explain to them that you're Greek?
Well, fortunately, we had a lot of Italians, so
Yeah, clearly. Yeah,
and
Martino is Italian, right?
right, and of
So you got
course,
this Greek head coach. He's eating
yeah.
Italian food with the
So
team.
ziti led to linguine and clam sauce, chicken parmesan, veal, but it began this process, and a key was also starting to pull the parents in, and then
So
uh,
I'm sorry, I have to ask. So here you are. You're trying to change the culture of this team. You're trying to change the mindset, but you just didn't do it through toughness and hard work. You also saw the need to build the relationships, and you do that around food and social activities and just building that bond. You didn't just break them down. You
right,
you also you also nurtured a fellowship between them, right?
we did, and we extended that. We did not have lights on our field, which is sort of an anomaly in high school football around the country. In northern New Jersey, like only one of the teams in our league had lights, so all of our games were on Saturdays. So
Okay.
Friday night after our light Friday practice, we'd send them all home and then bring them back into the gym, and we would have just team building sessions. We'd break up into the various groups. We'd watch some film. We'd go over, game plans with the quarterbacks, and then we'd let them have some fun. But we wanted them to be together for those few hours. Now, we also had ulterior motives. These are high school kids. We were not that much removed from being high school kids, and we wanted to make sure everyone was doing the right thing on Friday night. So,
Yeah, you understood the temptations.
right. So
Yeah.
we sent them back home, and then we would randomly call their homes, especially those, the older kids, the kids who drove, the ones we thought might be trying to sneak out. And the rule was you had to answer the phone, because if you didn't, you didn't play the next day.
And there are no cell phones, so you're calling the home
Oh,
phone.
we're getting a landline. And
Right. That which meant they couldn't be out with their friends, chasing the girls, and answering the phone and pretending like they're in their backyard because yeah, you were calling landlines.
right. So early on in that first season, we got suspicious because we were getting these excuses by parents or siblings that the player wasn't home. And then Bob Valley, who was also a phys ed teacher, heard through the grapevine that there was a party at a particular kid's house, not a player. So we piled into one of our cars and we drove up there. It looked like a Abbott and Costello movie because people were just scattering when they heard, "Here comes Coach Cal." So that was it. After that, we were home free. We didn't
So
get excuses from
1979, this was about the time that the movie Animal House came out.
Yeah, but
And so you've got Animal House going on with your players.
well, and so that really set the tone that, if we call and you're not home, you don't play. Parents loved it. But there, again, some great stories about how girlfriends and siblings, and even parents try to cover a few times. But it was all, again, part of changing the culture. And we also did some things, and I have to, again, credit Joe Pompeo, the offensive coordinator. When we would walk out to practice or to games, we would form two lines, and the players would walk out together, holding hands. And it was almost like Roman battalions. In fact, the head of our
Yeah.
history department said, because she saw us going out to practice one day, said, I just love what you guys are doing. And then, and they still do it to this day. And recently I was given credit in the local newspaper for starting this. We would, after we won a game at home, we would create a big C for Cresskill in the middle of the field and get on our knees and kiss the field, which was the most paganistic, ridiculous thing you could ever think of. But Bill, it was just,
So,
the kids all bought into it. And again,
Coach, I feel like I'm reading a script for a movie like Remember the Titans.
well,
Except in Remember the Titans, they came dancing out,
yeah, well,
doing some weird little dance thing.
you guys couldn't dance very well, but
Well, they couldn't either in the movie.
right. It was all part of the mentality. And then the next year, 1980, we won the first league championship in the school history.
Okay, so you took over the program in 1979. They were 1-8 in 1978. And a year later, they win the league championship.
No, 2 years
1
later.
year. 2 years later. Okay. So in 2 years, this team went from 1-8 to winning the league championship in 2 years.
Yep.
So, Coach, I have to ask you, how did you come up with this strategy, this philosophy? Because here's the thing that I think really hurts a lot of businesses and a lot of leaders is that they're too impulsive, that they address things as they happen rather than strategically through a plan and a philosophy. You clearly had a plan. You had a philosophy. You had a vision. You saw the character and the values you wanted to instill into your players. Hard work and team comes first, and you're being a good citizen. All of these things, right? And so, as opposed to, as I just mentioned, being a leader who's just impulsive, and when something happens, your emotions take over. You are strategic. You had a plan. You had a philosophy. What caused you? Was it your own experience as a player at Columbia? What made you do these things?
Bill, as always, man, you're right on it. So it was the collective experiences that I had as a player, understanding what worked and what didn't work. And one of the biggest mistakes I saw coaches make were, this is the philosophy that I'm using, and this is what we're going to do.
No matter what.
My take was, and again, we were a Group 1 high school, which is the smallest group, public school group in New Jersey.
Okay.
We're going to mold.
And that's based on the size of your student body, not the number of players on your team.
Right.
Right. So you had fewer kids to choose from.
Right. I mean, then
you had kids on your team that wouldn't make make the team at a big school.
Right. So we created our football philosophy around the fact that we're going to determine the skill sets of our kids and let it grow from there, rather than us trying to implement, a strategy that really doesn't fit them as players. And my background was defense. So rule number 1 was, look, we're going to play great defense. I was also a kicker, which is an area that a lot of high school teams back then, we're going to be great on special teams. And then on offense, we figured out, we're going to throw the ball, because as a defender, the thing that most impacted, my view of the game was when teams vertically stretched the field in the passing game, it put tremendous strain on our ability, because now instead of, covering, 20 by 53 yards, now you got to cover 50 by 53. So we threw, every quarterback that I coached threw for over 1,200 yards. And in fact, one kid hit 2,000. And we just, we ran the ball very well. We were a very wide open, as you could imagine, Bill. I would not do anything conservatively, but we were wide open. And the 1980 team, not only was it the first league championship, but 6 or 7 of those players went on to play college football. One got a full scholarship to Virginia. Another played at Harvard. Another played at Villanova. So now this this groundswell of Cresskill football. Now the parents were looking at this, now we're starting to get more kids coming in from other sports to play. And then we had great seasons in 81 and 82, 83. I mean, these were all really solid years. And then everything came together in 1984. We ran the table. We went 11-0. We were state champs. One of our players, our split end, was first team all-state, all groups, which from a Group 1 school was completely unheard of, because not only was it all the giant public schools, it also included the parochial schools, some of which, years later went on to win, mythical national championships. So
yeah, sure, some real powerhouses.
Yeah, so it was really it was quite an amazing year. We had 3 kids on first team all Bergen County, which was also unheard of from a Group 1 school. We were the Bergen County team, Group 1, Group 2 team, and I was coach of the year. It was really, it was great. And then in 85, 86, my last seasons there, we also had, winning teams. And then my goal was to become a school administrator, and I became a vice principal at Pagoda High School, not Pagoda Columbia, Pagoda, New Jersey. But it was really, again, just an incredible ride. And Bill, what struck me as I thought about our discussion this afternoon, one of the things that we always prided ourselves on were being realists. And these young men, to a person, we want, please treat us like men. And I said, I'll treat you like men until you don't. And
until you don't act like a man.
Right. And then there'll be consequences. And they got that. And then I, after every game too, I would say to them, look, don't drink hard liquor, because I knew they were going to go out and drink beer. And, again, being in that space not too long ago. Don't get arrested and embarrass your family and our program. And then a little off color, but I thought it was very important. I said, and if you're fortunate enough to have the opportunity, practice safe sex. So like some of the sophomores didn't get that, but, the juniors and the seniors, but, I felt like, look, these are, impressionable young men, and we've asked them to sacrifice so much. I want them to feel that way. And then, Bill, as a classroom teacher as well, I wound up teaching most of my players at some point because,
Sure.
we have the U.S. history requirement, and I taught from the honors, down to the, all levels. And that was very important too, because I got to know these people and they got to know me outside of a whistle and, slamming my clipboard and drawing up plays. So that was a very important element as well.
So obviously at 28, you made a lot of mistakes. I mean, you're learning, right?
Who didn't? Right.
Right. You're learning. I don't think I don't think we ever completely master the talent of leadership. And Paul, coach, please weigh in and tell me if you think I'm completely wrong on this. But I have a very unique philosophy, and that is that not everyone is capable of leading. I think that leadership is a talent, just like singing. And I've never heard anyone else say that. And I think a lot of people would like to refute that, because then it says, well, then if that's true, not everybody can do it. I don't think everybody can do it. I think that you can take someone, so for instance, in my case, I can carry 2 or 3 good notes together, and then here comes the bad note.
Right.
And
No, Bill,
Bill,
I completely agree with you. I think unequivocally, leadership is an innate talent that not everyone is blessed with.
Yeah, right. Just like singing, going back to the singing analogy, I can sing and carry a tune. Like I say, I'll hit 3 or 4 good notes, and then here comes a bad note. And as a result, nobody's ever going to pay me to stand on stage. I'm never going to win a Grammy. Now, here's the thing, coach. Could you go out or could I go out and hire a voice coach and get better? absolutely. I could get better. Um, I'll never win a Grammy. I'll never be, a platinum album recording artist. That's not who I am. But through the proper coaching and discipline and work, I can improve my singing skills, right? Does that make sense? I think
Absolutely.
leadership is the same way. So, I think we should always be trying to find coaches and people to help us become a better leader. And so here you are at 28 years old and you're tasked with leading one of the most difficult demographics in American society, teenage boys who do want to chase girls, don't want to do their homework. Now I get it. This is, the late 70s, early 80s. Our culture as a nation was very different then. I think that's undeniable. But still, there's nothing easy about leading a 16, 17-year-old boy, right? There's nothing, some are going to be easier than others. Some are going to come from families that have instilled the right values, and some are going to come from families who didn't instill the right values. And you've got to bring them all together. So, back to my point, I'm sure at some point you made some mistakes. And, anything jump out, anything like, I remember one time, that you want to share with us in terms of, like,
Oh, well, but we don't have enough time to go through all of them.
well, we won't go through all of them.
Well, you know, mistakes from a football perspective,
Yeah,
mistakes from evaluating players happen at all levels.
that's right.
Mistakes in the classroom.
Derek Jeter wasn't the number one overall draft pick.
Right. Look,
I think five teams passed on Derek Jeter, and he's sixth all time in base hits.
If you live in the code that, in my religion, and I think in yours as well, in Christian religion, the last perfect dude they nail to a cross.
Right.
So taking that into effect, you do your best. My parents always said, look, if you could look in the mirror and say that you did your best, that's you can't really ask. But let me give you an example, because you just told the story. So
yeah, go ahead.
You talk about the range of young men that you get, and this is a classic story. So Steve Rogovich was a sophomore on that 79 team. He was a pain in the neck in the classroom. He was always getting into trouble, but he wanted to play. His two younger brothers played down the road for us. Folks were great. He was a real nuisance and was constantly doing extra laps, So we didn't have great talent, but hung with it. We broke him. It was like a wild stallion. We finally broke him. And junior year, he got better. Senior year, he started and he played. He joins the Marines. About 6, 7 months in, I get a letter from him. Coach Cal, I would just want to tell you that what you and Coach Valley and Coach Pompeo did for me has had the biggest impact on my life. He said, your double sessions made boot camp look like a day at the beach. He said, I can't
We're talking
tell
the Marines here. We're not talking, my branch,
right. And,
the Air Force.
He said, I can't tell you how many guys would be crying and moaning at night. And I would be like, hey,
this isn't anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So Bill, I was so touched by that. I mean, when I showed it to the other coaches, we were all amazed. And then his first leave, he came into school in that Marine uniform, brought tears to my eyes. I'm still friend with that knucklehead today. He seriously, he called me the other day. I was on the beach. But
first of all, there's no better looking dress uniform than the Marine uniform. And I can say that as an airman, having spent 9 years in the United States Air Force, I love my branch. There's no better looking uniform than the Marine dress blues. That's a beautiful uniform.
Yeah. And Bill, that, what he said, we've heard from 30 or 40 ex-players. Just, you guys had such impact on us.
That's what leadership does. great leadership, whether it's coaching high school sports, whether it's being a great leader in business, that's what leadership does, right? Makes great leadership makes other people better. The goal isn't for you to win coach of the year. You won coach of the year, and that's a tremendous honor. Congratulations. And I've heard that every time you and I talk, this guy tells me about the time he won coach of the year. No, I'm kidding. He does it for our listeners. He's never, in fact, I didn't know that until this conversation. But it's great to win those awards. But, to that point, coach, when I was in the Air Force, I served under two types of commanders. Commanders who wanted to earn promotions and medals for themselves, and commanders who wanted us to earn medals and promotions. And they're vastly different. There's no similarities between those two leaders. And that's what great leadership does, is it develops other people, makes them better. And that's this kid Joe, you said his name? No, Steve. What's this kid's name? Steve, yeah. That's what your leadership did. Was it didn't just help the team become successful on a team, it helped them become better people. And that's a powerful thing. I mean, that's a really powerful thing.
Bill, really some of the most, as I mentioned, influential events in my life. And then hearing this now from 50, 55-year-old men saying, what you did for me as a person, the lessons that you taught us. I mean, half of them are, remember, there's no substitute for hard work. And they thought we were raving lunatics.
Yeah.
When we first were. And then, we were very fortunate also because this was literally a community that came together. Cresskill was this small town. I had the genius idea when the head of our booster club moved due to a work relocation. I asked a guy named Richard Kurtz to become the president of the sports boosters. And Richard, who I taught, his daughters, and of course, Jeff, played for me. Richard couldn't have embraced this any better. And all of a sudden now we got Olympic weights, we got whirlpools, we got ice machines. It was, and it's really hilarious because when I moved from Ridgewood to Dobbs Ferry, I found a box with all this old Cresskill football stuff, and they wanted the game programs. And Richard, using his influence, had all of the service providers of the New Jersey Apartment Association, Kislak, Wilmar, Gordon and Thomas, just and those names meant nothing to me then. And
right.
Right. So great man. And of course, he recruited me out of education into Campson and the multifamily world. And as I've said to Richard, many times, meeting him really changed my life because it then led to, Sure Deposit and RLL and,
so
meeting you, right?
Yeah, that's right. So Coach, will you come back? I'd like to have you back.
Oh, anytime.
So
I got a lot more. I have a lot more
our time is up. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to have you back. And I want to focus on two things when you come back. Number one, I want to hear more about that undefeated season. I want you to dive in a little bit more about that and the impact that had, not only on you, your staff, the community, because I think greatness affects everybody who's associated with it and on any level. So I want to dive in more about that undefeated season because that's a special thing, right? And so Absolutely. I want to dive into that. And then what I'd like to do is talk about how this experience catapulted your successful business career, because that's a guy I know. I didn't know you when you were Coach Cal. You're the original Coach Cal before that other guy from Kentucky. But I've always known you as Paul Kaliades, the business leader, but I knew this other part about you existed. I knew you were a coach. I knew about your time at Columbia and the Heisman Trophy, two votes for the Heisman Trophy. And I think I've even heard the story of Johnny Rodgers and when he won the Heisman Trophy. And
oh yeah,
that was a great story. So I knew some of these stories, but I think our audience would really benefit from hearing a little bit more about the impact of that undefeated season and how that affected the entire community and how that just catapulted the culture even more. And then some of the lessons learned of taking, going from being a high school coach and translating some of those skills into the business world. Will you be willing to do that for us?
Absolutely.
Well, listen,
Love
this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm sure